Hey guys, welcome back to another great game of CEDH. And before we get to the gameplay, is anyone else excited for Dominaria now that it's been released? I know the DOB crew has definitely built a few decks to test, and check back for a video showing off the new commanders coming soon. Starting us off is Fernando on Jacob Hauken. This is his mono blue taking turns list that lets him use Jacob's front side for early game card advantage while relying on his flip side for some insane card advantage with 3 spells. And while the deck is a little fragile, I was definitely impressed. Next is hidden playing Belbe, and this is big mana Belbe, and is copied from the 99s list, which I'll have linked in the corner, as is a great reference, and Patrick really goes through a lot in detail explaining the deck. In the third spot, we have Jimmy piloting Kalamax, and while this dino has made a few appearances on the channel, I know any deck Jimmy brings always has a signature spice added to it. But the core of this deck is Kalamax, turn sideways, get swole, and copy some spells, with the classic Underworld Breach Brain Freeze win con. And bringing up the rear, we have mtga Loots playing Tymna Tana. This deck is otherwise known as Blood Pod, and is what's known as a meta crusher deck. It's a stack deck that is highly customizable to what you want to hate on. Its goal is to grind the game down and gain card advantage, since you know what stacks pieces are coming. Tuned to a specific meta, it can often hold the entire table down, but only if tuned properly. And without further ado, let's get on to the gameplay. Also, before the game starts, Lutz and Jimmy both mold to 6. Fernando starts off the game with an island and a jeweled lotus. The lotus is then cracked for a turn 1 Jacob, and Fernando ends his turn with the ponder, shuffling and drawing a card. Hitting cracks a prismatic vista for a force and uses it on an elvish mystic. Jimmy has a command tower as land, and Lutz just plays a luxury suite as land as well. Fernando starts by activating Jacob to draw and exile a card from his hand. He has another island and taps 2 for an arcane signet. Hidden plays a swamp and casts his commander Belbe. He then heads to combat and sends his elf at Lutz, who takes the hit, and on his second main, Hidden gains 2 colors and uses it on a dampening sphere. Jimmy has a tropical island and casts a talisman of creativity. Lutz on his turn shocks in a sacred foundry and heads to his second main to gain 2 colorless and uses it to help cast Athalia, Guardian of Thraben. Fernando once again activates Jacob to draw an exile. He ends his turn with a Malevolent Hermit and a tapped Mystic Sanctuary. Hidden untaps and plays a Nurturing Peatland and casts a Fiend Artisan. Hidden then heads to combat and smacks Jimmy with Belbe, and once again gains 2 mana off Belbe and uses it to help cast an Eternal Witness to grab his Prismatic Vista back to hand. Jimmy shocks in a breeding pool and then heads to his second main to get mana off Belbe. This helps pay for Kalamax. Lutz had wanted to Red Elemental blast it, but with his own Thalia out, he doesn't have the mana and the dino resolves. Lutz plays a Bountiful Promenade as land and heads to combat, sending the Thalia at Fernando, who doesn't block. Lutz gets his mana, but hates he needs to use it on an Aven Mind Sensor now, before the colorless disappears. Fernando taps 2 for a Phantasmal Image. He wants to force Lutz to destroy the Kalamax with the Red Elemental Blast. Lutz is unfortunately a little too scared of 2 dinos showing up, so in response, he blows up Jimmy's, and the Phantasmal Image then resolves, becoming a copy of Belbe. Fernando then heads to combat and sends his Hermit at Jimmy. Jimmy then takes 2, and on Fernando's second main, Fernando gains 4 colorless, and then activates Jacob to draw and exile, with Fernando then paying the 6 needed to flip his commander over to Hawken's Insight. Although with the Sphere and the Thalia out, he can't actually cast anything, but does have a Flooded Strand to play as land. Hidden replays and cracks his Prismatic Vista. He decides to gamble with the top 4 and whiffs. He then heads to combat and sends his Witness at Jimmy. On his second main, he gains 6 mana from Belbe.
Yes, I'm sorry. Because you don't get double from hitting yourself.
Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
don't
a
get-
Phantasmal Images. It's a Belbe.
Why you keep hitting yourself, bro? Why you keep hitting yourself?
So there's 2 Belbes right now.
There's
So
two
I've got-
Belbes right now, yes.
Then for a total of 8 mana, he casts a Turn Timber Symbiosis. It resolves and he finds a very spicy Birds of Paradise, which enters with 3 +1/+1 counters. Jimmy starts by pinging himself with his talisman for a blue and casts a Brainstorm. He pays the extra for Thalia and draws 3, putting 2 back. He then heads to his second main and gets 4 mana off the Pelvies, and for 5 casts a Rhystic Study. Lutz has a Windswept to heath his land. He cracks his fetch for a Bayou and then casts his commander Tymna. He lets Jimmy draw and heads to combat. He sends Thalia at Jimmy and the Aven at Fernando. Both can't block, and on his second main he pays 2 life to draw 2 off Tymna and then gains 10 colorless mana from the Belbes. Luckily for the table, Lutz is low on colored mana and casts a Mindblade Render, playing for the Rhystic and the Dampening Sphere. Fernando starts by exiling his top card to the Insight and draws Return. He cracks his fetch to look for a land and also whiffs. Fernando then sends his Hermit at Jimmy, who still can't block. He gains 6 colorless and then activates the Insight to cast a Nexus of Fate for free, although he does have to pay for the Thalia, and he then holds priority and casts a Narset's Reversal on his own Nexus. He pays the extra for his Dampening Sphere and then casts a Runaway together to bounce the Fiend Artisan and the Aven Mind Sensor. Jimmy finally remembers his Rhystic and draws, but doesn't have anything, and Fernando goes to his second turn. Fernando untaps and exiles his top card. He's not finding any lands and heads to combat. He sends his Hermit at Jimmy and uses his mana to recast the Nexus for an additional turn. Fernando then heads to his second extra turn and exiles another card. He finds an island off the top and then uses his Insight to cast a Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. He pays for the Thalia but not the Rhystic, and Jimmy draws. Fernando then upticks the Jace to mill Lutz for 2 and draws a card. He then sends his Hermit at Jimmy for more Belbe mana. He then pays 4 mana into a Sensei's Divining Top and lets Jimmy draw and passes.
Go nuts. Alright. I did my extra card. I did that. I unfortunately have to pass.
Wow, we survived.
It's too much shade for this deck. It's very frail.
Gotcha.
Seems like you're close.
I was close.
Hidden has a Dryad Arbor's land and heads to combat. He sends the birds at Lutz and Belbe at Jimmy. They both connect and Hidden gains 8 colorless, and he then casts an Entwined Tooth and Nail. He does pay for the Rhystic, to which Jimmy just casts a Force of Will to ruin Hidden's day. Jimmy plays and cracks a Windswept Heath for a Taiga, and heads to his second main for 4 colors off Belbe. He recasts Kalamax, to which Fernando responds with a Mana Drain. He doesn't pay for the Rhystic, and Jimmy then responds with a Pyroblast, to which Fernando stops it by sacking his Hermit to counter the spell and ending Jimmy's turn there. Lutz starts off with a Loyal Apprentice. He gives a card to Jimmy and heads to combat. He makes a hasty Thopter and sends his Mindblade Render at Jimmy, the Thopter at Fernando, and the Thalia at Hidden. Hidden chumps with his Eternal Witness, and then Lutz loses 1 to draw off his Mindblade. He then moves to his second main, and he pays 2 life into Tymna to draw 2. He then gains 10 colors from the Belbes. And for any that might be confused, he got 4 mana from damaging Jimmy, 2 from hitting Fernando, and 4 from losing a life to the Mindblade. Lutz then plays a Spectator seeding his land and is not happy about what he has drawn. Also, all that colorless mana isn't helping him as he casts a Catilda, Dawnheart Prime. He pays the extra for the Sphere and Rhystic, and luckily Catilda gives him the extra colored mana from his humans. He then recasts his Aven Mind Sensor, still paying the additional taxes, and ends his turn sourcing Fernando's Phantasmal Image. Fernando untaps and exiles a card from the Insight. He then gains 6 colors from his Mana Drain and uses it to top. He ranges the top 3 but doesn't like what he sees and casts a Merchant Scroll to try and clear away the chaff. He lets Jimmy draw and reveals a Fierce Guardianship. He then gets to shuffle his library and tops again.
Oh.
Was that what you needed?
Oh shit. Yeah.
Do you have enough mana to cast it?
Nope. That's the whole point. He cheats Scene into play. Well, now you guys know that if I get one more turn, I win. So whatever.
What, we do? Is that true?
Yeah.
What's the card?
I'm not gonna tell you.
Okay,
yeah,
well, I would not have known that, even by your reaction, so
Whatever.
thank you for letting us know.
I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that.
Fernando then upticks Jace to mill Jimmy and draw a card. He uses his insight to play an Urza Saga and then hands the turn over after that. Draw.
There's a lot of us this game.
Yeah. Hidden then heads to combat and sends Belbe at Jimmy and the birds at Fernando. He gains 4 colorless and for 4 casts a static orb. He does pay the extra for Ristic and passes. Jimmy untaps 2 lands and casts a Fire Mind's Research. He does still take 2 from an Ancient Tomb, but doesn't have any use for the colorless Belbe mana. Lutz untaps 2 lands and plays a tap Path of Ancestry. He then heads to combat and sends the Aven at Jimmy, and he draws off Tymna, but also doesn't have any use for the colorless and his Ensep Fernando tops. Fernando untaps 2 and exiles the top card. He plays an island and then tries to cast an Enter the Infinite from his Insight. Unfortunately for the table, they don't have any answers, and Fernando then uptakes the Jace to mill himself and draw and win the game. And before I get into the game review, I want to thank our Patreon subscribers. Game review. Man, people could not stop hitting themselves this game. It's crazy what can happen when there are 2 Belbes out and about. Belbe generated so much mana over the course of the game, and it definitely made an impact. Unfortunately, it really made more of an impact on Hidden's opponent than Belbe herself. And this is definitely where Belbe can struggle. Especially when the Aven shut down his tutors. Belbe is great for mana advantage, but really struggles on that card advantage. It's also surprising how in CDH other decks can really abuse Belbe's ability for a little self-harm. Whether it's fetches, shocks, or talismans, other decks can choose to take extra damage from themselves pretty easily. And Fernando definitely used it to his advantage. And while his deck did dirtle around a little bit due to the Damning Sphere and Thalia, free spells is a really good form of advantage, especially while Lutz was starting to gain some momentum, he just wasn't fast enough. Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I just wanted to let you know that we have a TCG affiliate link, and if you ever see a card you want to try or are inspired to brew something new, use our link when purchasing and we'll receive a small portion of the sale. This is a great way to support the channel, and if you enjoyed the gameplay, please leave a like and subscribe, as it really helps us keep making videos. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.